The third season of HBO's White Lotus is well on its way. And while every season we get to see new but equally obscure and fascinating characters, there is one constant in plain sight that most of us may be overlooking, and it's the title. It's the duality and hidden aspect of the White Lotus which makes it a brilliant title. Because this series isn't just a luxury resort drama, it's a story about the dark side within all of us. So today let's break down why this symbol matters, how it's been used throughout history, and how HBO's The White Lotus is quietly telling us that paradise is never what it seems to be. By the way, this video contains only spoilers for season 1 and 2. Season 3 remains untouched, like The White Lotus itself. Anyway, to really understand why The White Lotus is such a loaded title, we have to trace the symbolism back thousands of years. One of the earliest cultural uses of the lotus goes back to ancient Egypt, around 2500 BC, during the Old Kingdom period. The lotus flower appeared in pyramid texts, some of the oldest known religious writings. These texts reference the lotus in connection with the sun god Ra, who was said to have emerged from a giant lotus at the dawn of creation. To the Egyptians, the most meaningful thing we could do was die. I had to say that. No. Well, yes, but the lotus closing at night and reopening in the morning was a powerful symbol of rebirth and eternal life. Jump forward to 1500 BCE in India, and the lotus shows up prominently in Hindu texts like the Rig Veda and later the Bhagavad Gita. Here it becomes a symbol of spiritual enlightenment, of living in the world but remaining untouched by its impurities. As the Bhagavad Gita says, one who performs their duty without attachment, surrendering the results to the Supreme, is unaffected by sinful action, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. Then we have Buddhism, emerging around 500 BCE, where the lotus becomes central to its imagery. It represents the journey from suffering to awakening. And you might know the phrase, no mud, no lotus, which already hints at the underlying dark side that constitutes the existence of this magnificent flower. Because you see, the beauty of the lotus flower is floating on the surface, a delicate bloom resting peacefully on the water's surface. But what we don't see lies just below. Its stem stretches down through murky, stagnant water. At the end, its roots are buried in thick, rotting mud, literally growing out of decay. That's what makes the lotus so powerful as a symbol. The filth and darkness below, it rises into something pure and untouched. It's an illusion. And it's the same illusion we see in the White Lotus, a luxury paradise floating on top of centuries of exploitation, inequality, and the people working beneath it, holding it all up. Frequented by guests who themselves are knee-deep in shit. Let's start with the guests before we go into the deeper meaning for society as well as you and me. The White Lotus resort itself is perfect. White sand, crystal clear water, smiling staff. Everyone is pretending to live their best lives. But what's under that surface? Surprise, it's all power games, resentment, exploitation. It is this constant tension building right beneath the beauty. Every single character is dealing with some version of this duality, holding up an image of who they wish they were, while hiding the mess that got them there. Let's take Rachel in season 1. She marries into wealth and privilege, thinking it will elevate her. But on her honeymoon, she realizes she's becoming ornamental, just another petal in someone else's perfect life. She wants to rise above the mud of her insecurities and dissatisfaction, but feels trapped in it. She literally says, "I'm not happy. I made a mistake." Yet by the end, she floats back into the role expected of her, choosing to stay on the surface. Or our favorite, Tanya. She literally embodies the White Lotus herself. Fragile, clueless, privileged, wanders through Sicily believing in her own romantic, idealized story. But in the end, she is simply manipulated both by the man she loves as well as her new friends. "These gays, they are trying to murder me." I love that line. She ultimately dies in the very water that seemed so beautiful to her at the start. Tanya is a lotus that gets dragged back into the mud. She can't actually rise above the consequences of her own privilege. or the Grasso man. 3 generations of men, grandfather, father, son, arrive believing they are there for family bonding. But what we see is a cycle of inherited misogyny and entitlement. They repeat the same mistakes driven by desire and ego, never really evolving. They resent it when seeing it in one another, but don't recognize it in themselves. In Lotus terms, they are stuck in the mud, destined to rot there, and passing it down. But it doesn't stop with the guests. The White Lotus also holds a lesson for modern society as a whole. The White Lotus isn't just about rich people behaving badly on vacation, it's a mirror held up to how wealth, tourism, and privilege operate in the real world. Just like the lotus growing out of the mud, the guests' luxury exists precisely because of the people and systems beneath them, doing the invisible labor. Take season 1 in Hawaii. The resort is built on land that once belonged to the native population. Yet the indigenous Hawaiian characters like Kai are left working low-wage service jobs for the descendants of the people who took it. Kai is pressured into a robbery by Paula, who momentarily becomes aware of the injustice around her, but when things go wrong, the system doesn't protect Kai. It crushes him. He gets arrested, Paula gets to go home. The guests get their vacation back on track, and nothing changes. It's a direct reflection of Hawaii's real-life struggles, where tourism drives the economy while displacing local communities and driving up the cost of living for them. The White Lotus makes this dynamic impossible to ignore. These beautiful resorts depend on an entire class of people working behind the scenes, cleaning the rooms, serving the food, managing the chaos, all while smiling and staying invisible. In Sicily, this takes a different form. You have Lucia and Mia, 2 young women using the resort as a hunting ground for wealthy men. For them, the hotel isn't paradise, it's survival. They're navigating a local economy built on catering to outsiders with money, trying to extract whatever they can before getting pushed aside again. Lucia literally walks away richer, but even that feels precarious. For locals, the resort doesn't represent rest, it represents opportunity, if you can endure the grind of serving people who will leave you behind. And this is why the White Lotus hits so hard. It's not just a satire of individual privilege. It's about entire economies built on pretending paradise is real. These guests come and go, but the workers stay. The locals stay. The same power dynamics repeat season after season, vacation after vacation. The lotus keeps blooming, but the mud never goes away. But if that made you uncomfortable, just give me another second. Because the White Lotus isn't just about those people over there. The rich, the entitled, the oblivious. It's about you, just as it is about me. Because whether we've stayed at a resort like this, dreamt of it, or even just watched it from the comfort of our homes, we are participating in the same fantasy. We are seduced by the surface, the beauty, the calm, the escape, while rarely thinking about who's keeping it all running beneath the waterline. Every time we buy into the dream of a perfect getaway, a luxury experience, or even the idea that we can remain untouched by the world's messier problems, we are floating on the same lotus pond. Someone is always holding us up. Someone's labor, someone's land, someone's sacrifice is what makes that beauty possible. The White Lotus asks us to look down, to notice the mud we're floating above, to question who pays the price for our peace, and maybe, just maybe, to admit that we've been pretending not to see it and appreciate it a little bit more. Because in the end, the biggest twist of the White Lotus might be realizing the show isn't about them, it's about us. If you like this video, maybe you will also enjoy a video about sofas. But not just any sofas, the royal sofas from The Crown. It's all about power and control through sofas. Can you believe it? Me neither.